people. I'ma have to lead them, I'ma have to teach them. Bring it back to the Most High God, yeah, yeah.
The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America, The Missing Skeletons, and the Great Smithsonian Cover-Up by Richard J. Dewhurst. Summary. Drawing on 400 years of newspaper articles and photos, first-person accounts, state historical records, and illustrated field reports, Richard J. Dewhurst reveals not only that North America was once ruled by an advanced race of giants, but also that the Smithsonian has been actively suppressing the physical evidence for nearly 150 years. He shows how thousands of giant skeletons have been unearthed at mound builder sites across the continent, only to disappear from the historical records. He examines other concealed giant discoveries, such as the giant mummies found in the Spirit Cave, Nevada, wrapped in fine textiles and dating to 8000 BCE, the hundreds of red-haired bog mummies found at Sinkhole cenotes on the west coast of Florida and dating to 7500 BCE, and the ruins of the giant cities with populations in excess of 100,000 in Arizona, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Louisiana. Dewhurst shows how this suppression began shortly after the Civil War and transformed into an outright cover-up. In 1879, when Major John Wesley Powell was appointed Smithsonian Director, launching a strict pro-evolution, pro-manifest destiny agenda, he also reveals that the 1920s discovery on Catalina Island of a megalithic burial complex with 6,000 years of continuous burials and over 4,000 skeletons, including a succession of kings and queens, some more than 9 feet tall, the evidence for which is hidden in the restricted access evidence rooms at the Smithsonian. Publisher's description. Table of Contents, Part 1. Findings on Ancient American Giants. How big were they? North America, Land of the Giants. How old? Clues from mastodons and carbon dating. Copper crown kings and pearl bedecked queens. Part 2. Sophisticated cultures of the ancient giant. Pyramids and pictorial mounds, cities in circles and lines, a copper kingdom and a mica mines, treasures of giant burial grounds. Part 3. Pre-Columbian foreign contact, holy stones, a calendar stele, foreign coins, extremely ancient red-haired mummies, megalithic Catalina, the blonde-haired children of the 9 feet tall kings, insights into origins. And if you get to read this book, The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America, you come to the realization that this land, America, is not what we're being told, and is far older than what these people and these archaeologists and all these governors and elite people governing America has been covering up for a long time. And as of the parts I've read, I have seen in this book that giant sized skeletons of giant people who used to rule the Americas, when they found the skeletons, they found them with copper armor, copper helmets, copper weapons and axes and swords and copper spears. And the giants with the skeletons, they were all injured as if they were killed in a war or killed in battle. And just to sum up this video, we are trying to make a comparison of the land of Canaan, the land that flows with milk and honey, that was ruled by ancient giants, by the sons of Anak, and the Israelites, who went into battle and killed off the giants, as we see later on this video.
But to date, we probably have about 14 or 1,500 accounts and going, from Catalina Island, California, to Martha's Vineyard. Double rows of teeth, 7 foot and taller, skeletons reported. New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, and it's not just newspaper accounts. George Washington reported giant bones in Virginia. Even Abraham Lincoln talked about the discovery of giant bones.
At a certain point, I reluctantly started to believe.
But if all the accounts are to be believed, what is the truth about these enormous skeletons? Are these colossal creatures evidence of a lost world that's remained hidden for thousands of years?
There's different theories. One is that there was a royal class of giant Native Americans. This civilization radiated out from the Ohio River Valley, built geometric forms in massive pyramid-like structures, burial mounds. But also, the Native Americans spoke of an ancient enemy, oftentimes portrayed as a cannibalistic race of giants. But the story doesn't end there. Every culture around the world has myths and legends about giants. You have Goliath, the Titans, the Cyclops or Grendel, Paul Bunyan and Jack and the Beanstalk. It's in the collective imagination of humanity for some reason.
Could several millennia of folklore and mythology be rooted in an incredible reality? Was there an ancient American civilization that once built astonishing stone monuments and entombed its gigantic dead? If so, then where is the physical evidence? Where are the giant skeletons?
Museums had these bones. They were in the records.
There's literally 1,000 individual accounts, but to date there is not one verified giant bone at a museum. That's the big mystery. Where are the bones?
One explanation could be that reported giant bones were among thousands of skeletons returned to native tribes according to federal repatriation laws.
It just seems like it slipped through the hands of history.
But there's another theory. Some believe there were scientists around the turn of the 20th century who deliberately concealed these alleged giant finds.
There is a distinct possibility that they were actively taken away. They're in some dark corner because they're not matching up with somebody's version of human history. I haven't visited the secret warehouse, but there's a good case to be made.
During this time period, archaeologists and explorers who worked to compile evidence of giants were largely dismissed by the scientific establishment.
The whole topic is radioactive,
Academics know, don't touch it.
and that's why we feel driven to move forward into the field, because nobody else will do it.
So there are records and newspapers, people all over the Americas, finding large skeletons of giants that predated the modern Native American in the Americas. But at the same time, the museum, scientists, and archaeologists backed up by the Smithsonian have denied and erased all evidence ever since.
Several Native American tribes have passed down similar stories through oral traditions of a race of red-haired giants. They claim these giants were cannibals who were wiped out by the Great Spirit in several major cataclysms as punishment for their wickedness and for forgetting justice and mercy. Strangely, old books have now surfaced with pictures of the first white European explorers landing on the American shores near Florida and the southeast and running into exactly the same thing: tall, tattooed, white-skinned cannibals with red or blondish red hair, as well as pictures of cataclysms and tsunamis. Could these in fact be the same race of giants that the natives describe? Why haven't we been told about any of this in our school books? The natives claim these giants excelled in art, mining, and architecture that are way beyond anything we can achieve today. We'll examine what the Comanches had to say about these master-crafting white giants, the Navajo about the giant Starnake people, the Choctaw about the giant Nahulo people, and the Paiutes about the giant Sitaka cannibals of the West. Chief Rolling Thunder of the Comanches, who inhabited the Great Plains, gave the following account of an ancient race of giants in 1857. He said, innumerable moons ago, a race of 10 feet high and far more rich and powerful than any white people now living, here inhabited a large range of country, extending from the rising sun to the setting sun. Basically, he means America was filled with white giants from coast to coast. He said their fortifications crowned the summits of the mountains, protecting their populous cities situated in the intervening valleys. They excelled every other nation which was flourished, either before or since, in all manner of cunning handicraft, were brave and warlike, ruling over the land they had wrested from its ancient possessors with a high and haughty hand. Compared with them, pale faces of the present day were pygmies in both art, building, and arms. The chief explained that when this race of giants forgot justice and mercy and became too proud, the Great Spirit wiped it all out, and all that was left of their society were the mounds still visible on the tablelands. This account was documented by Dr. Donald Yates, a researcher and author of books on Native American history. The Navajo people of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah speak of the Starnake people, a regal race of giants endowed with mining technology which dominated the West. They enslaved lesser tribes and had strongholds all throughout the Americas. They were either extinguished, they do not say how. The Choctaw people of Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, and Florida speak of the Nahulo, a race of giants that once inhabited the now state of Tennessee, and with whom their ancestors fought when they arrived in Mississippi in their migration from the west. Their tradition states the Nahulo was of wonderful stature. That means giants. They were said to be cannibals whom the Choctaw killed whenever the opportunity arose. This account was given by Horatio Ardwell Cushman in his 1899 book, History of the Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Natchez Indians. Finally, the Paiute people of northern Arizona, Utah, Nevada, Oregon, and eastern California spoke of the Sitaka, a people who practiced cannibalism and lived in Lovelock Cave. Human remains were unearthed there in 1912, and a few of the human bones had the marrow removed, suggesting the marrow was eaten. The remains had red hair. It is commonly agreed that the excavation of the site by anthropologist Llewellyn L. Loud was not handled very well and certainly not up to modern standards. Some proponents of the Sitaka giants theory claim researchers have deliberately covered up any giant remains found there. Now, where have we heard that story before? Food for thought.
Saying, and you talk about some of that in the book, also that the Nephilim were on the earth and certainly in the Americas, and that is startling. That goes against really the history that we've been taught in our schools. But you know, you mentioned giants and star people, and this is in Native American oral tradition, certainly in some of the tribes that I've talked to. But there's one account that you told me, which I found very interesting, with two tribes that they made a treaty. Tell us about that.
Well, when I was in the service, there was a Mohawk gentleman who was also in the service with me. And he was sharing a story from his people about there was a time where the Allegheny, which is where we get the name for the Allegheny Mountains.
Sure.
That was the name for the giant
And this
tribes.
is Alleghenies are where?
Up in the northeast area.
Okay.
You know, so
Pennsylvania, New York.
Right,
Okay.
the Allegheny Mountains. And according to their oral tradition, they had a very huge stronghold right across the river. And so they would frequently raid. When I say they, the giants would
okay.
raid the villages, taking the women, taking the men. They would easily, grab a warrior, bite their head off, drink the blood. I mean, that's the sheer size and stature of these giants. Well, the Mohawk put out a call to gather the warriors together because something had to be done.
Sure.
And I'm paraphrasing because there's a very specific way our stories are told, so I'm paraphrasing. And as they gathered the people together, many of the other nations of the Iroquois Confederacy did not want to go against the giants.
Why is that?
Out of fear.
Out of fear.
Because also they demanded tribute as well.
Let me stop you. Folks, go back to the biblical prophetic narrative, which discusses David and Goliath. You remember that the Philistine, Goliath, comes out and blasphemes the God of the Bible, and none of the Israelis, of the Israeli army will confront this guy. And this is, I mean, the parallels to the stories are incredible.
Oh, absolutely. And so the Huron were the ones who answered the call. And so the Huron and the Mohawks sent out 2 scouts. And when they went across the river and they came back, they reported, yes, they're giants, they have a fortified city, but with the Creator's help, we can take them down. And so there was a large battle that took place. The warriors were victorious. And as a result, there's a wampum belt. Now, the northeastern tribes, they use wampum belts to record their stories. And this wampum belt still exists among the people that records the story of the battle against the giants. And then the Huron and the Mohawk said that forever they will be at peace with one another because they were the only 2 that answered the call to go defeat the Allegheny giants.
Chapter 13. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Send thou men, that they may search the land of Canaan, which I give unto the children of Israel. Of every tribe of their fathers shall ye send a man, every one a ruler among them. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses, and said, Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men that went up with him said, We be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, The land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were. Chapter 14. And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, and the whole congregation said unto them, Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness? And wherefore hath the Lord brought us unto this land, to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey? Were it not better for us to return into Egypt?
Let me ask you something, and this is, I just question popped into my head here. That battle is how old? 1,000 years?
Oh, there's thousands. 1,000,
okay.
2,000 years
All right.
old.
I'm just wondering if they buried them in a mass grave someplace, and if the oral tradition of those particular tribes, Huron maybe, would know where that burial mound might be.
It's very possible.
Very possible.
I don't know of where it is, but
okay.
It's very possible.
In the oral tradition of many tribes, I've yet to come across a tribal member from a tribe that does not have stories of giants roaming the land. And there's many stories of the people and the tribes fighting against them. Sometimes, with good results, sometimes with bad results. Until eventually there was a culmination of the flood that came and destroyed the giants off of the land. We still have some stories of giants after the flood. Ishtipapa, which was a giant that lived in Georgia among the Muskogee Creek. Ishtipapa means man-eaters, because these giant beings would just come and take a regular-sized human being and just pick them up and just bite their head off and just drink the blood, like popping the cap on a bottle, boom, 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 boom. So they received the name Ishtipapa, man-eater. The origin of them is not something that I know of that our oral tradition goes into. Like who created them? How did they begin? We don't have that. All we know is where they came from.
So we have oral stories, oral evidence of giants ruling America, and oral stories and oral evidence of Native Americans fighting and having wars with these so-called giants in this land, in this big land. And we have also biblical texts that correlate with what the history and what the folklore and the tales of the Native Americans, which were brought down from their ancestors, of these wars, of these fights here in America. And this is a modern map of the U.S. alone, of giants or giant remains, giant skeletons found only in the U.S. just like in the land of Canaan, biblically, a land where giants roamed the land, and no other place on the earth as the land of America, which bringeth forth so much fruit, and has wood, and has all these evidences of these giant beings, or these big people that built monuments, structures, were advanced in technology, and were of great stature, giants, as in the Bible, because we know Torah is the truth, and we now have evidence of giants in this land.
History of Deerfield. This is eminent historian George Sheldon. One of these skeletons, this is on page 78, monstrous size, head as big as a peck basket with double teeth all around. Examined by Stephen Williams, who said the owner must have been nearly 8 feet high. 8-foot skeleton, double rows of teeth. Like, what the hell is that? And I just felt compelled to dive into the historical texts. So I spent countless hours, tens of thousands of pages, and I found similar things. Middleborough, Mass, 7-8, double rows of teeth. Up in Rockingham, Vermont, the jawbone was of such size that a large man could easily slip it over his face, and the teeth, which were all double, were perfect. Double rows of teeth again. Here we go, Martha's Vineyard, 7 foot, an unusual feature, a complete double row of teeth in both the upper and lower jaws. So I went to the Pecumtuck Museum. I said, yeah, here you go. Sheldon talks about an 8-foot skeleton with double rows of teeth. Do we know anything about this? He said, oh, here's his archaeological scrapbook. This is my Da Vinci Code moment. I open it up, and he has giant skeleton reports pasted in there with mound builder stuff, and Sheldon was basically, in his collaging saying that it looks like he believed the mound builders were in New England, and they had race of giants interspersed with them. Very, very strange indeed. 1883 catalog of curiosity and relics at the museum shows that an over 8-foot skeleton was actually on display there, parts of it, and a giant skeleton from Gill. And I talked to the physical anthropologist who was part of the team who reinterred that for the Native American Repatriation Act. So on display in Deerfield, they had giant skeletons, and it's right at the top there, over 8 foot, or it says at least 8 foot. So I'm like, I'm trying, I thought I had credibility with all the stuff I was doing. I'm getting into the twilight zone of research, and I'm like, I just have to follow. I'm compelled to report what I find. And I find that there are other researchers who encountered the same thing and have hundreds of reports in their books. Fred Zimmerman, Ross Hamilton, right here, Philip Reif. I'll just read you quickly. Chapter 5 of his book is called Anatomic Anomalies. At least some of the giants who once inhabited the United States differ from modern humans in ways other than their tremendous size. Judging from the number of their remains, they also possess some unique anatomical features. One of these features that keeps cropping up repeatedly in reports of giant skeletons from a variety of geographic areas and time periods. In fact, it seems nearly every giant skull found with its dentition intact includes the same peculiarity, double rows of teeth. So at least I know I'm partially not crazy. So, Abraham Lincoln, the eyes of that extinct species of giant whose bones fill the mountains of America have gazed on Niagara as our eyes do now. Abraham Lincoln, 1948. Washington uncovered giant skeletons in 1754, working for the Virginia militia. There are many historical accounts. Honest Abe. New York Times, hundreds. Scientific American, American Antiquarian, New York Times. This was known at the time and then eventually buried. Right here, Chief Justice McKean, Judge Bryan, and others found 2 11-foot-3 skeletons. 9 foot out of one of the burial mounds in Wisconsin. 10-foot-9, Wheeling, Virginia. The sheriff found it. On and on and on. Charles Huntington, this is at the Cattaraugus Museum in New York State. He found, when they unearthed these 2 skeletons, a 9-foot male and a 7-foot female, took the measurements, the bones crumbled away like many did because they weren't mummified, although some bones survived and went to places like the Smithsonian. So he made this. I talked to his granddaughter, and she said he was driven to do this by what he saw. I should have somebody to picture for scale, but that's 9 feet tall. Not like, Boston Celtics, 6'2", 9 feet. So Warren K. Moorhead, the Dean of American Archaeology, found giant skeletons when he unearthed them all around the country. Tioga Point, Pennsylvania, 68 of them, over 7 foot tall, many much larger. Many specimens went to the American Investigating Museum and they were stolen. And there's all these reports over and over again. I know, it's pathetic. Skeleton in copper armor, a giant he found in Illinois at Chillicothe. Connecticut, giant skeleton. Warren K. Moorhead, the Dean of American Archaeology. And I found a curious thing in the secret text of the Freemasons and Rosicrucians. They also talk about this. They have, right here in my newest article, I have pictures of the skulls of almost 10-foot skeletons. The Rosicrucians and the Freemasons in their secret texts talked about this and had matter-of-fact reports from like Town Histories in the New York Times, and they use it to connect it to the lost continent of Atlantis right in the text. So I'll just lay that out there, whatever that means. I know it's a freak show. So the Smithsonian, we're told that it's the height of science, and honestly, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole any further, but there appears to be a lot of misinformation and corruption all around the Smithsonian and what they're doing. Right here in their own reports, 7'6", there's giant skeleton reports in their ethnology reports. Right here, this front skeleton over 7 foot. That's a Smithsonian burial find, Nelson Mound. 8'4", Professor McGee on the left from the Smithsonian. They bought this skeleton, $500 from San Diego, took a tissue sample, and it's down at the warehouse and not to be seen again. Here we go, thighs and skulls sent to the Smithsonian. Smithsonian Institution to determine the age of the skeleton. Yeah, they might determine it, they're not going to tell us.
Archaeological evidence of giants is still a subject of spirited debate among scientists, theologians, and others. As we have seen, countless newspaper articles in the 1800s and early 1900s tell of human skeletons being found throughout the world, but especially in North America. And curiously, among many of those reports is the recurring claim that the giant skeletons were sent to the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., and mysteriously disappeared. In Atlanta, Georgia, the Banner on May 6, 1884, told of Smithsonian scientists finding giant skeletons in an Indian burial mound. Quote, "The stones were removed when, in a kind of vault beneath them, the skeleton of a giant who measured 7 feet 2 inches was found." End quote. The article further noted all the relics were carefully packed and sent to the Smithsonian Institution and are said to be the most interesting collection ever found in America. The New York Times on March 17, 1924, published a story from Lewiston. Quote, "A huge skeleton believed to be that of a prehistoric human being has been discovered in Salmon River County by 2 members of the State Highway Department who brought their find to the city. Belief that the person was of a herbivorous race was expressed owing to the peculiar formation of the jaws and teeth. Both the upper and lower jaws each had only 10 teeth, all of which were intact." End quote. Physicians said the skeleton was a woman more than 8 feet tall, and the bones were also, supposedly, sent to the Smithsonian for study. Though there are plenty of newspaper reports of finding giant human skeletons, Time magazine wrote in 1994 that, quote, "Yet despite more than a century of digging, the fossil record remains maddeningly sparse. With so few clues, even a single bone that doesn't fit into the picture can upset everything. Virtually every major discovery has put deep cracks in the conventional wisdom and forced scientists to concoct new theories amid furious debate." End quote. A common claim among many of the stories is that the artifacts were shipped off to the Smithsonian, sometimes accused of destroying them. Of course, the Smithsonian denies all of this, and scholars seem to be divided on the issue. Why would the Smithsonian destroy such spectacular artifacts if they did in fact receive them? And why aren't they on display? Where are they? Why doesn't the Smithsonian want to talk about it? Could the Smithsonian have reclassified donated bones as animal fossils? The answers to those questions pits Darwinian evolutionists against creationists and provides a hot topic for conspiracy theorists, while moviegoers will remember the final scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark when the Ark of the Covenant disappears into a mammoth Smithsonian storage facility never to be seen again. One Nevada report said, quote, "The Smithsonian Institute are very keen to hide many discoveries, as it would mean all the books would have to be rewritten, and they are very much aware of this. It would also mean academia had it wrong, and they refuse to simply acknowledge that the nature of archaeology is such that as we make new discoveries, we need to update with reference to new findings." End quote. Perhaps Dr. Greg Little, another noted researcher and author on the subject, said it best. He criticizes the Smithsonian's stance on the issue of giants, writing in 2014 in AP Magazine, quote, "I don't see the Smithsonian as being in a conspiracy in the true definition of the word. I see it as a sort of stupidity in the sense that they have ignored an aspect of their own findings that the public sees as intriguing. Instead of engaging the public, they alienate it. I also see that American archaeology resents all outsiders, resist all beliefs that go against their beliefs, and they utilize skeptics as a sort of police force to silence critics and others. From a psychological standpoint, they are doing battle with their own shadow. It is a battle that can't be won." End quote.